In the quaint suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Estates, life often unfolded in predictable patterns. Families gathered for weekend barbecues, children played freely in the lush green parks, and friendly waves were exchanged between neighbors as they went about their daily routines. However, beneath this idyllic facade lay an undercurrent of tension, primarily manifested through the ever-watchful eyes of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. Among its ranks, one member stood out with alarming clarity. We'll call her Karen. Karen was known throughout the community for her unwavering dedication to enforcing every rule and regulation outlined in the HOA's extensive handbook. Her commitment to maintaining the neighborhood's decorum was both admired and feared. While some residents appreciated her vigilance, many others found her to be overly zealous, often interpreting minor infractions as grave offenses. In a world where most conflicts were resolved amicably, Karen had a knack for escalating situations that most would consider trivial. As summer rolled into Maplewood Estates, the community pool became a central hub for families looking to escape the sweltering heat. Laughter echoed off the water as children splashed and played, while parents lounged under sun umbrellas, sipping iced teas and exchanging stories. It was a time of togetherness, where worries seemed distant and joy prevailed. One sunny afternoon, however, an innocent gathering at the pool turned into a spectacle that would shake the neighborhood to its core. The day started like any other. The sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with the sounds of children enjoying their freedom. Among them were my kids, who were oblivious to the rules that governed our community. Rules that often felt more like guidelines than strictures meant to stifle joy. Amidst the laughter and splashes, my children decided to engage in an impromptu game of water tag. The game involved playful antics, diving underwater, chasing each other around floats, and shrieks of delight resonating across the pool deck. They were simply being kids, caught up in a moment of unfiltered joy. But it wasn't long before Karen's watchful gaze fell upon them. From her vantage point near the pool entrance, Karen observed what she deemed inappropriate behavior. In her mind, my children's exuberance crossed a line. They were too loud, too wild, and perhaps even too carefree for her liking. The notion of public decency loomed large in her interpretation of the situation. Instead of approaching us directly to voice her concerns, something many neighbors would have done, Karen resorted to her preferred method of conflict resolution. She picked up her phone and dialed 911. The sound of sirens piercing through the cheerful atmosphere was jarring. As I stood at the edge of the pool watching my kids play, I couldn't comprehend why there was an urgent need for law enforcement intervention over something so innocuous. It felt surreal as I saw police cars pull up outside our community pool area, a scene more suited to a serious crime than a group of kids enjoying their summer break. When the officers stepped out of their vehicles, confusion reigned among the gathered families. Parents exchanged bewildered glances while children paused mid-game to stare at this unexpected disruption. I approached one of the officers cautiously as he began to survey the area. "Is everything all right?" I asked nervously. The officer looked at me with a mixture of professionalism and disbelief. "We received a call about public indecency involving minors at this location," he explained matter-of-factly. Public indecency? The term hung heavily in the air, feeling absurd amid splashes and laughter. I tried to explain that my children were simply playing, nothing inappropriate or outlandish occurring within our own pool. Yet there was little I could do at that moment but stand helpless as they assessed the situation. As other parents began to approach us in disbelief, murmurs spread throughout the crowd about who could possibly make such an outrageous call. Some defended Karen's actions as a misguided attempt to maintain order. Others expressed outrage that anyone would take things so far over what was clearly innocent fun. The police officers remained professional throughout, but couldn't hide their astonishment at being called out for such a trivial matter. After speaking with several parents and observing my children's behavior firsthand, still giggling and obliviously splashing about, the officers concluded that there was no basis for any charges or further action. As they began to disperse, relief washed over me mixed with anger toward Karen for creating such chaos in what should have been a simple day at the pool. The atmosphere shifted from confusion back to laughter as families resumed their activities. Yet an invisible rift had formed among us. In those moments following the police's departure, I realized this incident represented more than just an embarrassing afternoon. It highlighted deeper issues within our community regarding authority and individual freedoms. How had we allowed one person's interpretation of decency to overshadow our collective enjoyment? As conversations circulated among neighbors about what had transpired, it became clear that this incident would spark discussions about boundaries, what it meant to be part of a community while balancing personal liberties against collective expectations. Thus began a chapter in Maplewood Estates filled with tension and division. A chapter centered around one woman's determination to impose her vision of propriety on everyone else. And all it took was a simple day at our community pool turned upside down by an unnecessary call to 911. The day began like any other summer afternoon at the Maplewood Estates community pool. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the azure water, inviting families to gather and enjoy the season's simple pleasures. Children laughed and splashed, their joyous voices blending into a symphony of carefree delight. As I settled into a comfortable lounge chair with a book in hand, I couldn't help but feel grateful for these moments, a respite from the hustle and bustle of daily life. My kids, ages 8 and 10, were particularly enthusiastic that day. They dove into the pool with infectious energy, engaging in a game of water tag that seemed to have no bounds. They darted around with gleeful abandon, their laughter echoing across the pool area. Friends joined in, creating a lively atmosphere filled with playful competition, splashes, and cheers. As I watched them play, I noticed Karen seated at her usual spot by the entrance. Her sharp gaze was fixed on my children. I felt a twinge of unease. She had always been quick to criticize any behavior she deemed inappropriate. Still, I brushed it off, convincing myself that today would be different, that perhaps she would allow everyone a little leeway during these joyful summer days. But as the game continued, I could see her body language shifting. She sat up straighter, her lips pursed tightly as she scanned the pool area with an air of disapproval. My heart sank as I began to worry that she might approach us soon with some complaint or another. Just when I thought we might escape her scrutiny, I heard the unmistakable sound of her voice raised above the din. "Excuse me," she called out sharply, her tones slicing through the sounds of laughter like a knife. "That's enough. This is unacceptable." My stomach dropped at her words. The children halted mid-splash and turned toward her in confusion, faces painted with surprise. "What's wrong?" one of my kids asked innocently, still dripping wet and breathless from their game. "It's public indecency," Karen declared as if she were delivering a verdict from on high. Her eyes narrowed as she pointed an accusatory finger toward them. "You are disturbing everyone here." The atmosphere shifted drastically. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as other parents exchanged glances of disbelief. What had started as innocent fun was now being categorized as something sinister in Karen's mind. I could feel my blood boiling as I stood up from my chair to confront her. "Karen?" I said firmly but calmly, trying to maintain composure despite my rising anger. "They're just playing. They're kids enjoying themselves at our own pool." Her reaction was immediate and dismissive. "Children need to learn boundaries," she retorted sharply, crossing her arms defiantly across her chest. "This isn't just about them. It's about setting an example for everyone else. If we let this go unchecked, what's next?" I took a deep breath to steady myself while glancing around at other parents who had begun to gather near us. Some looking sympathetic but others clearly uncomfortable with how this confrontation was unfolding. "Karen," another parent interjected gently, stepping forward to diffuse the tension. "It's summer vacation. Kids are supposed to have fun at the pool. They aren't doing anything wrong." However, Karen seemed unfazed by this attempt at reason. Her conviction held strong against any rational argument presented to her. Then came the moment that shocked us all. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right before our eyes. The realization hit me like a cold wave crashing over my head. She was serious about involving authorities over what was simply harmless play. "Are you really calling the police?" I asked incredulously, feeling my frustration boil over. "Yes," she replied defiantly, pressing the phone closer to her ear while glaring at me like I was somehow complicit in this outrageous behavior. At that point, everything felt surreal. It was difficult to comprehend how things had escalated so quickly from innocent fun to potential criminality in Karen's mind. The laughter around us faded into whispers of disbelief as people processed what was happening. A call to law enforcement because children were swimming and playing in their own community pool. Within minutes that felt like an eternity, police sirens echoed off the walls of nearby homes and grew louder as they approached our neighborhood pool area. As we awaited their arrival, anxiety filled the air, a stark contrast to the carefree atmosphere just moments before. When two officers stepped out of their patrol car and approached us, they wore expressions mingled with professionalism and confusion at being called for such an incident. The sight of them drew even more attention from curious onlookers who had begun to congregate around the pool area. "Good afternoon," one officer greeted us while scanning the scene before him. "We received a call regarding public indecency involving minors." It felt absurd hearing those words spoken aloud amidst children still frolicking in the water. An idyllic scene turned absurd by one woman's interpretation of rules and norms. I stepped forward again, taking a deep breath before speaking to them directly. "Officer, they're just playing. There is nothing inappropriate happening here." The officers exchanged glances before one of them nodded slowly in understanding but also appeared taken aback by the seriousness of Karen's complaint. After speaking briefly with several parents who echoed my sentiments, affirming that there was no cause for concern, the officers decided to observe for themselves rather than jump straight into action based on one person's claim. As they watched my children play joyfully without any hint of indecency or misbehavior, it became clear that Karen's definition of appropriate conduct did not align with reality, or with how most people viewed childhood innocence. Seeing them interact with each other brought a sense of relief amid rising tensions. It reminded everyone present that these were just kids enjoying summer vacation, not criminals deserving arrest for simply having fun at their neighborhood pool. Finally concluding there was no basis for any charges or further action needed on their part, the officers politely excused themselves from our gathering while expressing gratitude for our cooperation during this unusual situation. As they left, whispers spread through the crowd regarding what had just occurred, an incident some would undoubtedly remember for years to come. The laughter returned tentatively as families resumed their activities. However, lingering tension remained. A reminder that joy could sometimes be overshadowed by misguided intentions and overly vigilant neighbors looking to impose their standards on others. In those moments following the police's departure, it became evident that things would not return entirely to normal. Something had shifted within our community dynamics, and it all stemmed from one woman's determination to impose an unrealistic standard upon us all based merely on how she viewed decency at our own pool. The moments following the police officer's departure were filled with a palpable tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. Families resumed their activities around the pool, but laughter felt strained, and conversations were laced with disbelief. It was hard to shake off what had just transpired. The image of the officers standing by the pool, questioning whether children were engaging in public indecency, lingered uncomfortably in my mind. As I tried to gather my thoughts, I noticed Karen still sitting at her post by the entrance, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her expression was one of self-satisfaction, as if she believed she had done a public service by calling in the authorities. It infuriated me. How could someone be so oblivious to the damage they caused? I felt a surge of protective instinct for my children and all the other kids who had been dragged into her misguided drama. With my emotions swirling, I approached Karen, determined to confront her about her actions. "Why did you feel the need to call 911? I asked, trying to maintain a calm tone despite my rising anger. "You could have just spoken to me or any of the other parents here." Karen turned toward me slowly, her face a mask of resolve. "I did what I thought was necessary," she replied coolly. "Children need to learn that there are consequences for their behavior." "Consequences?" I echoed incredulously. "They were playing. They weren't doing anything wrong." Her gaze remained fixed on me as she replied with unwavering conviction. "But if we allow kids to run wild without boundaries, how will they ever learn?" This exchange felt futile. She was entrenched in her beliefs and unwilling to see any other perspective. As I stepped back from her, I realized that this incident was not just about my children but also about how we define community standards and personal freedoms. As murmurs spread among other parents nearby, I could feel their eyes on us, some showing sympathy for my viewpoint while others reflected uncertainty about how to approach Karen without inciting further conflict. It became evident that many families in Maplewood Estates shared similar frustrations but were hesitant to voice them openly. In the days that followed, the incident at the pool quickly became the talk of the neighborhood. Social media groups buzzed with commentary. People posted updates and opinions while sharing their own encounters with Karen's vigilant nature. Some recounted tales of being chastised for trivial matters like leaving their trash cans out too long or having decorations deemed inappropriate during holiday seasons. I took it upon myself to address our community's growing concerns directly, organizing a casual gathering at my house for those interested in discussing how best to handle situations like this moving forward. The idea was met with enthusiasm. Many parents expressed relief at having an outlet for their frustration while fostering community connections that had been strained by Karen's actions. On the night of our gathering, laughter and chatter filled my living room as families gathered with snacks and drinks in hand. As we settled into our seats, I opened the floor for discussion about what had transpired at the pool and how we could collectively address similar issues in the future. One parent chimed in first, recounting their own experience with Karen, a complaint over minor yard decorations that were deemed too gaudy for neighborhood aesthetics. Others shared stories ranging from disagreements over pet regulations to confrontations about noise levels during family gatherings. "I think it's time we stand up against this kind of behavior," someone suggested passionately. "We shouldn't let one person dictate what is acceptable in our own homes and community spaces." Nods of agreement rippled through the room as parents voiced their frustrations and fears. It became clear that many felt stifled by Karen's overbearing presence. They wanted their children to enjoy life without fear of being reported for innocent play or trivial infringements. As discussions deepened, we brainstormed potential solutions. Ideas ranged from formally addressing concerns through HOA meetings to organizing neighborhood events aimed at fostering camaraderie among residents while promoting an atmosphere of freedom within reasonable boundaries. Throughout this process, it became increasingly clear that we needed a united front against unreasonable complaints driven by one person's rigid interpretations of rules. The realization weighed heavy. If we didn't come together as a community, then incidents like the one at the pool would continue unchecked. At last, we determined that our next step would involve confronting Karen collectively during an upcoming HOA meeting, an opportunity not only to express our concerns but also to redefine what it meant to live harmoniously within Maplewood Estates. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and anticipation buzzed in the air as families filed into the community center's meeting room. The atmosphere felt charged. Everyone understood what was at stake. Not just our freedom to enjoy summer days by the pool, but also our right to raise our children in an environment where joy could flourish without fear. As we took our seats around a long table facing Karen and other board members, I couldn't help but feel a sense of solidarity among us, a force fueled by shared experiences and collective determination. One parent spoke up first, addressing not only Karen but also everyone present about how incidents like hers impacted not just individuals but entire families within our community. "We're all here because we care about Maplewood Estates," he said passionately. "But it shouldn't come at the expense of basic joy and freedom for our kids." The room erupted into supportive murmurs as more voices joined in, each sharing anecdotes about Karen's past complaints while emphasizing that we needed balance between maintaining order and allowing space for happiness. Karen sat quietly through these discussions, perhaps realizing that her approach had alienated many people who once valued her input on HOA matters. But there was no denying that she clung tightly to her beliefs. Every so often, I caught glimpses of defiance in her demeanor whenever someone challenged her authority. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that a consensus had formed. We would work together as neighbors rather than allowing one individual's rigid standards dictate how we lived our lives or raised our children within this community. As families dispersed after the meeting concluded, a sense of hope washed over me. It felt like we had taken not just a stand against one person's actions, but also embarked on a journey toward creating an inclusive environment where joy thrived alongside respect for each other's differences. Little did we know then how far-reaching this incident would become. A catalyst igniting discussions about boundaries and freedoms within our neighborhood, while reminding us all of why communities exist in the first place. Connection through shared experiences, both good and bad alike. As the sun continued to shine brightly over Maplewood Estates, the atmosphere around the community pool shifted dramatically following Karen's startling call to 911. The arrival of law enforcement transformed what had been a carefree day into one marked by confusion, tension, and disbelief. While the laughter of children echoed from the pool, the reality of the situation began to sink in for everyone present. The two police officers who arrived at the scene quickly assessed the situation. They stepped out of their patrol car, their expressions a mix of professionalism and bemusement as they surveyed the lively scene before them. Families were scattered around the pool area, some still enjoying the warm water while others stood in clusters, murmuring about what had just happened. I watched as one officer walked toward Karen first, likely wanting to get her account of what had prompted such an unusual call. "Ma'am," he said politely but with an air of caution. "We received a report about public indecency involving children here at this location." Karen wasted no time in presenting her version of events. She explained how my kids and some others were engaging in rowdy play that she deemed inappropriate for a public space. As she spoke, I could see her gesturing animatedly toward the water, emphasizing each splash and shriek as if these simple joys were criminal acts. The officer listened attentively, but I could see his brow furrow slightly as he processed her claims. After all, it was hard to reconcile Karen's interpretation with what was happening right before his eyes. Children laughing and playing in their own neighborhood pool. As the other officer moved through the pool area, he began speaking with various parents who witnessed the incident unfold. Their responses echoed my own frustration. They described how innocent play had been wrongly interpreted as something nefarious. Parents recounted tales of children simply being kids, playing games, splashing water, and enjoying summer freedom, without any hint of misconduct. "I don't understand how this is a police matter," one father commented incredulously. "They're just having fun. It's not like anyone was being harmed." The officer nodded in agreement but maintained his professionalism throughout. "We appreciate your input," he said kindly but firmly. "We just need to gather information to ensure everyone's safety." As I stood nearby watching all this unfold, I felt a swirl of emotions. Anger at Karen for instigating this entire debacle and embarrassment that our community had been thrust into such an absurd situation. The reality that children could be scrutinized under such harsh terms left me feeling deeply unsettled. After speaking with several families at the pool and observing my children's behavior firsthand, it became clear that no one was engaged in anything remotely resembling public indecency. Yet Karen seemed undeterred by this reality. She continued to insist that her concerns were valid. In a final attempt to clarify the situation, one officer approached me directly. "Ma'am," he said gently but seriously, "can you explain what happened from your perspective?" I took a deep breath and recounted how my kids were merely playing a game of water tag, a harmless activity typical for a hot summer day at the pool. I emphasized my belief that children should be free to express themselves while enjoying their surroundings without fear of reprisal for simply being children. The officer listened attentively as I spoke. His expression softened as he began to understand our perspective better. He nodded thoughtfully and assured me they would assess the situation based on evidence gathered from everyone present, including my children's innocent joy. Once all discussions concluded and it became evident that there was no basis for any charges or further action required, both officers stood before Karen one last time. "As far as we can see," one officer said diplomatically but decisively, "there are no grounds for any action today. The children are engaged in normal activities for their age group." Karen's expression hardened momentarily as she processed this news. Her plans had effectively unraveled before her eyes. Although she didn't utter another word, it was clear that she'd be leaving unsatisfied with how things had turned out. With that conclusion reached, the officers thanked everyone for their cooperation during an unusual call-out and made their way back to their vehicles. As they drove away from Maplewood Estates, a collective sigh of relief swept through the gathered parents and children, all too aware of how close we had come to allowing one person's perception dictate our sense of community and enjoyment. In those moments after the police left, I noticed that families began finding their rhythm again. Laughter returned tentatively as kids resumed playing games while parents exchanged glances filled with shared understanding about what had just transpired. But beneath this return to normalcy lay an undercurrent of concern, an acknowledgement that our community needed to discuss boundaries regarding what constituted acceptable behavior, while also protecting the rights of families from undue scrutiny. As conversations flowed among those present at the pool, it became apparent that many shared similar sentiments. Nobody wanted another incident like this to occur again, especially not when it involved innocent children simply trying to enjoy their summer vacation. This realization prompted ideas about creating informal gatherings where parents could come together regularly, not only as a means of fostering relationships among neighbors, but also establishing open lines of communication regarding concerns within our community. A few days later, I found myself organizing an informal get-together at my house, inviting families from around Maplewood Estates. An opportunity for us all to discuss how we could better navigate potential conflicts moving forward, while promoting an atmosphere where joy flourished without fear or hesitation. As we gathered around snacks laid out on tables set up in my backyard adorned with string lights twinkling overhead against dusk's backdrop, a sense of camaraderie filled our space. It became evident that we were ready not just to stand against Karen's zealousness but also embrace each other's differences while advocating for our children's right to play freely within their own neighborhood. In many ways, this gathering marked a turning point, a commitment among families within Maplewood Estates not only to protect our kids' happiness but also redefine what it meant to be part of this vibrant community moving forward. One united by shared experiences rather than divided by unfounded complaints driven solely by fear or rigidity. Through meaningful conversations sparked by such absurdity surrounding Karen's actions, it reminded us all why communities exist in the first place. Connection through understanding, and perhaps most importantly, a celebration of childhood innocence amidst life's complexities. In the days following the incident at the pool, the community reaction in Maplewood Estates began to take shape. What had started as an isolated event quickly spiraled into a broader conversation about parenting, community standards, and the role of the HOA. Neighbors who had previously been polite but distant found themselves drawn together by a shared sense of disbelief and concern over what had transpired. The first signs of this collective reaction emerged in local social media groups where residents began discussing the incident. Posts ranged from incredulity to outrage, with many expressing their disbelief that someone would call 911 over children playing in their own neighborhood pool. "Is this where we've come to?" one neighbor mused, sharing a photo of her kids splashing about happily just days before. "Are we really going to start policing innocent fun?" As more residents chimed in, a pattern emerged. Many of them recounted similar experiences with Karen, sharing stories of her relentless adherence to HOA rules and her tendency to report minor infractions that most people wouldn't even consider worth mentioning. From complaints about lawn decorations that were too colorful to reprimands for noise levels during birthday parties, it became evident that Karen's behavior had long been a source of frustration for several families. "This isn't just about our kids," another parent pointed out in a comment thread. "It's about creating an environment where everyone feels welcome and free to enjoy their homes without fear of being scrutinized by one overly watchful neighbor." These sentiments resonated deeply throughout the community. What had initially felt like an isolated incident at the pool was now emerging as a significant concern. A reminder that the joy of living in Maplewood Estates could be undermined by one person's rigid interpretation of rules meant to foster community rather than stifle it. As discussions continued online, they eventually spilled over into real-life interactions at parks, grocery stores, and during school drop-offs. Parents began exchanging knowing glances and nodding in agreement when they bumped into each other. There was an unspoken understanding among us that something needed to change. Recognizing this growing momentum, I decided it was time to take action beyond informal conversations. Drawing from our previous gathering after the incident, I proposed organizing a town hall meeting focused specifically on addressing community concerns regarding HOA governance and neighborhood standards. The idea was met with enthusiastic support. Many parents wanted their voices heard and felt empowered to push back against unreasonable complaints. On the evening of the town hall meeting, excitement buzzed through the air as families arrived at the community center. Chairs were arranged in a circle to encourage open dialogue, and snacks were laid out on tables nearby, an attempt to foster a relaxed atmosphere amidst serious discussions ahead. As people settled into their seats, I opened the meeting by recounting what had happened at the pool, the absurdity of it all, and emphasized how this incident represented more than just one woman's actions. It pointed toward larger issues within our community about respect for one another's freedoms amid differing interpretations of acceptable behavior. Tonight, I said earnestly, we have an opportunity to create meaningful change together. We can redefine what it means to live in Maplewood Estates, ensuring our kids can play freely while maintaining a sense of order that everyone agrees upon. With those words, conversations began flowing freely around the room. Parents shared their thoughts on Karen's recent behavior while also voicing their desire for more balanced governance from the HOA. Many expressed concerns about how quickly complaints could escalate without any meaningful dialogue first taking place. One father stood up passionately and exclaimed, "We need clearer guidelines on what constitutes a valid complaint. If all it takes is one person's opinion to cause chaos, we're setting ourselves up for failure." Nods echoed throughout the room as others chimed in with agreement. The sentiment resonated strongly. People wanted an environment where children could thrive without fear and where parents felt supported rather than scrutinized for every little thing. Another mother suggested creating a committee within the HOA focused specifically on family-oriented events, something designed not only to foster connections among neighbors but also promote understanding between different perspectives about parenting styles and acceptable behaviors. As ideas continued pouring forth throughout our discussion, it became clear that we were united in wanting to reshape our neighborhood for future generations. One built on trust rather than fear or suspicion driven by overly vigilant neighbors. By the end of the meeting, we had established some actionable steps moving forward, forming a committee responsible for better communication between residents regarding concerns while hosting regular family-friendly events aimed at fostering relationships among neighbors, providing opportunities for open dialogue before issues escalated unnecessarily. As families departed the meeting filled with renewed energy and hope for change ahead, a sense of solidarity lingered in its wake, a commitment not just among parents but also across generations who valued togetherness amidst life's complexities. In subsequent weeks following our successful town hall gathering, things began shifting noticeably within Maplewood Estates. Families started organizing weekend barbecues at various homes. Laughter echoed through yards as children played together without inhibitions while parents mingled nearby chatting over drinks, the warmth returning once more after months spent navigating tensions surrounding neighborhood standards. Gradually, it became apparent that these events were having positive effects on community dynamics. People who previously avoided each other out of fear or resentment now mingled comfortably as new friendships blossomed amidst shared experiences over food and laughter. Even Karen seemed less animated in her complaints. Perhaps she realized that her views were increasingly outnumbered by those who prioritized connection over conflict. While she didn't entirely disappear from neighborhood conversations, her presence became less burdensome against this wave of unity, determinately pushing back against unreasonable scrutiny. As summer rolled on in Maplewood Estates, what initially felt like an isolated incident involving my children soon transformed into something far greater. A catalyst igniting conversations about boundaries while reminding us all why communities exist in the first place. A celebration not just of childhood innocence but also collective resilience forged through shared experiences as neighbors striving toward common goals amidst life's complexities. In the aftermath of the incident at the pool, the atmosphere in Maplewood Estates underwent a significant transformation. While the immediate shock and tension began to dissipate, the fallout from Karen's call to 911 lingered in the minds of residents, leaving behind a mix of emotions ranging from anger to disbelief. The incident had not only raised questions about community standards but also forced families to confront their own feelings about authority, parenting, and neighborly relations. Initially, my children were oblivious to the larger implications of what had happened. They returned to their routines with the same carefree spirit that characterized childhood. Yet, I noticed a subtle change in them, a hesitance when they approached the pool, as if they were suddenly aware of an invisible barrier between them and their previous freedom to play without judgment. It broke my heart to see my kids second-guessing themselves when all they wanted was to enjoy a summer day. As for me, I felt a wave of protectiveness wash over me. I wanted nothing more than to shield them from this unnecessary scrutiny, but I also recognized that this was an opportunity for growth. I took it upon myself to engage in conversations with my children about what had happened, explaining that while it was important to respect rules and boundaries, it was equally vital to stand up for themselves against unjust treatment. Just because someone says something is wrong doesn't mean it is, I told them gently. You have every right to have fun and be kids. Always remember that. Meanwhile, the rest of the community continued grappling with the repercussions of Karen's actions. Many families who had once kept their distance began reaching out more openly, sharing their own stories of feeling stifled by her demands. It became clear that Karen's influence had cast a long shadow over Maplewood Estates for too long. Her strict adherence to rules had created an environment where fear often outweighed fun. Conversations about creating guidelines for community behavior became increasingly common, with many parents advocating for clear definitions regarding noise levels, acceptable activities at communal spaces like the pool, and how to address grievances without involving law enforcement unless absolutely necessary. The aim was not only to protect children's rights, but also ensure that parents felt empowered rather than intimidated by one person's rigid expectations. Still, there were mixed feelings regarding how best to approach Karen herself. Some neighbors believed that confronting her directly about her actions would be beneficial, perhaps allowing her an opportunity to see how her behavior affected others. Others argued that it might only escalate tensions further, potentially leading to more conflict within our community. Ultimately, we decided on a balanced approach. Instead of directly confronting Karen with accusations or anger, we would invite her into discussions about community standards as part of our ongoing efforts toward fostering open communication among residents. The hope was that by including her in these dialogues, she might feel less inclined to act unilaterally without first considering other perspectives. As summer progressed and families continued gathering for barbecues and pool parties, we noticed a gradual shift in community dynamics. Laughter echoed through backyards once more as friendships blossomed anew. Connections forged not just through shared experiences but also a commitment toward creating a supportive environment for our children. However, despite these positive changes, Karen remained a contentious figure among us. While she attended some gatherings and engaged in conversations about community norms, there was still an underlying tension whenever she spoke. A lingering sense that her views hadn't fully evolved from those initial complaints that sparked everything in the first place. One afternoon at a neighborhood barbecue, I found myself standing next to Karen as we watched our kids playing together in the yard. The laughter echoed all around us while the scent of grilled burgers wafted through the air, a stark contrast from the tension that had defined our previous interactions. "Do you think things will ever go back to how they were?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence between us. I considered her question carefully before responding. "I think we're moving forward," I said thoughtfully. "It might look different now, but maybe that's okay. Sometimes change can lead us toward something better." She nodded slowly but did not respond further. Perhaps my words resonated with her more than I realized. In those moments together, watching our kids play freely, it felt like a glimmer of hope emerged amid uncertainty. As fall approached and school resumed, life in Maplewood Estates adapted once again. The incident at the pool becoming part of our neighborhood's fabric, rather than defining it entirely. While occasional whispers about the incident still surfaced during casual conversations or social media exchanges among neighbors, the overall sentiment shifted toward collaboration rather than division. Through all these changes came deeper connections among residents. Parents began forming new friendships as they shared parenting tips while discussing ways to create enjoyable experiences within our community without stepping on toes or calling 911. However, not everyone was satisfied with how things turned out. Some neighbors remained frustrated by what they perceived as excessive leniency toward children's behavior at communal spaces like pools or parks, believing clear rules should govern every aspect of life within Maplewood Estates. Karen became increasingly vocal about her concerns during HOA meetings. She often raised issues related specifically to noise levels during family events or what she considered inappropriate behavior from children, even as many others voiced strong objections against such rigid interpretations of acceptable conduct. This clash brought forth heated debates among residents, some siding with Karen's views while others stood firmly against them, demanding more freedom for their kids' enjoyment without undue interference from anyone who didn't understand what it meant truly living within a community focused on connection rather than control. The fallout from that fateful day at the pool had sparked critical conversations about boundaries. It prompted us all, including Karen, to examine how we define decency against joy, the balance between protecting children and allowing them room for growth amidst life's complexities, ultimately emerging victorious over rigid expectations set by any single individual alone. By wintertime arrived, Maplewood Estates had transformed into something richer than before, a place where laughter echoed freely once again, where friendships flourished amidst challenges, and where even those who once stood divided could find common ground through shared experiences nurtured by resilience against adversity brought forth from one woman's misguided actions. In every way possible, the aftermath served as both reminder and lesson. Communities thrive best when they come together, not just under shared guidelines but also under understanding rooted deeply enough so everyone feels heard, appreciated, no matter how different each person may be. As the dust began to settle in Maplewood Estates after the incident at the pool, it became clear that this event was not just about one woman's overly vigilant interpretation of community standards. It had sparked broader conversations around parenting and the very essence of what it means to be part of a community. The fallout from Karen's call to 911 had opened a Pandora's box of questions, urging residents to reflect on their values, expectations, and the social contract that binds neighbors together. At its core, the incident highlighted the delicate balance parents must navigate between protecting their children and allowing them the freedom to explore and play. In today's world, where concerns about safety often overshadow the joys of childhood, this balance has become increasingly complex. Many parents in Maplewood Estates found themselves grappling with their own fears: fear of judgment from others, fear of their children being labeled as disruptive, and fear of facing consequences for simply allowing kids to be kids. The conversations sparked by the pool incident encouraged many families to reconsider how they approached parenting within a community framework. Parents began to share their thoughts on fostering independence while still instilling respect for others. One mother shared her philosophy: "I want my kids to be able to express themselves, but I also want them to understand that their actions can affect those around them." This sentiment resonated deeply among attendees at neighborhood gatherings, serving as a reminder that parenting is not just an individual endeavor. It involves navigating the expectations and norms of the community as well. Simultaneously, discussions about community standards emerged as another critical theme. What does it mean to live in a community? Should individual preferences dictate how everyone behaves? Many residents began advocating for clearer guidelines that would promote understanding rather than foster division. They recognized that living in close proximity meant engaging in ongoing dialogues about what constituted acceptable behavior while respecting each family's unique values. The incident also raised questions about authority. Who holds the power to define what is appropriate within a community? In the case of Karen, her sense of authority stemmed from her role in the HOA and her rigid adherence to rules that many felt were outdated or overly strict. The resulting tension illustrated how one person's interpretation could ripple through an entire neighborhood, highlighting the need for shared governance that involves input from various voices rather than relying solely on an individual's perspective. As families continued discussing these themes at neighborhood events, it became evident that forging connections with one another was paramount in shaping a more inclusive environment for everyone. Parents sought ways to collaborate rather than compete. They wanted to uplift one another rather than tear each other down over differing views on parenting styles or acceptable behavior at communal spaces. This desire for unity manifested itself in several initiatives aimed at promoting inclusivity within Maplewood Estates. Families organized potluck dinners where everyone could bring dishes from their cultural backgrounds, sharing recipes and stories while forging deeper connections through food. Events like these allowed neighbors to get to know one another beyond superficial greetings. They encouraged genuine conversations about parenting challenges, successes, and shared experiences in raising children. Furthermore, these gatherings provided opportunities for families with different perspectives on rules and boundaries to engage constructively. Instead of pointing fingers or casting blame, a tendency that had previously characterized interactions with Karen, neighbors now approached conversations with openness and empathy. One parent suggested creating a community charter outlining shared values around parenting and expectations within common spaces like parks or pools. This approach emphasized collaboration rather than confrontation, aiming to create a space where every voice mattered. As winter approached and families gathered together more frequently indoors, conversations continued evolving around these themes. Parents found themselves reflecting not just on their own experiences but also on how they could teach their children about communal responsibility. One father remarked during a holiday gathering, "I want my kids to understand that being part of a community means caring for one another, not just when things are easy but especially when disagreements arise." These discussions allowed parents to consider how they could model positive behaviors for their children, demonstrating conflict resolution through dialogue rather than escalation. Teaching kids about empathy became paramount. Parents wanted their children to recognize that everyone has different backgrounds, beliefs, and ways of navigating life's challenges. For many families in Maplewood Estates, this experience served as an opportunity for growth, not only individually but collectively as well. The aftermath of Karen's actions spurred a movement toward greater understanding and connection among neighbors, a realization that despite differences in opinion or approach, everyone ultimately desired similar outcomes: happiness for themselves and their children. By embracing open communication regarding varying perspectives, whether about parenting styles or neighborhood norms, residents began fostering an atmosphere where curiosity flourished instead of judgment. Children began playing together without inhibition once more. Laughter echoed throughout yards as friendships formed organically among families who may not have interacted otherwise. In this light, Karen's actions inadvertently catalyzed significant change within our community, a shift toward embracing diversity rather than enforcing conformity based solely on one person's rigid standards. It encouraged residents to think critically about what it means to be part of something larger than oneself, fostering relationships built on trust while allowing room for individual expression. The unfolding narrative within Maplewood Estates ultimately became one rooted in collaboration, a testament to how communities can evolve positively when challenged by differing opinions or actions perceived as unjustified. By addressing underlying themes surrounding parenting dynamics alongside collective responsibility toward each other, we discovered pathways leading toward genuine connection amidst life's complexities. As spring approached with flowers blooming anew, the spirit of camaraderie thrived throughout our neighborhood. Families continued coming together regularly not only to enjoy each other's company but also share insights into navigating challenges faced during parenting journeys, creating bonds fortified by respect amidst diverse viewpoints. Through all these experiences, the broader themes surrounding parenting and community emerged clearly. We are stronger together than apart, and when faced with challenges head-on, it is possible not just to survive but thrive collectively amidst life's intricacies. As the seasons shifted in Maplewood Estates, so too did the community's narrative following the dramatic incident at the pool. What had begun as a summer filled with laughter and innocent play had turned into a complex tale of conflict and resolution, ultimately leading to a more profound understanding of what it meant to live harmoniously as neighbors. The time had come for reflection and renewal, a moment to embrace the lessons learned and chart a path forward. In the months after the incident, families worked diligently to foster a sense of unity within our neighborhood. The gatherings that began informally transformed into structured events aimed at promoting connection among residents. Potlucks, movie nights, and seasonal festivals became regular occurrences on our calendars, each occasion serving not only as an opportunity for fun, but also as a platform for meaningful conversations about community values and shared expectations. The initial tension surrounding the pool incident gradually gave way to a spirit of collaboration. Residents began engaging with one another in ways that transcended past grievances. People who once felt isolated by Karen's complaints found camaraderie among those who shared similar experiences. New friendships blossomed as families bonded over their children, their struggles, and their triumphs, all underlined by an understanding that we were all in this together. One pivotal outcome of these interactions was the creation of a community advisory committee, comprised of volunteers willing to take on the responsibility of fostering communication between residents and the HOA. This committee aimed to establish clearer guidelines regarding community standards while ensuring that every voice was heard in discussions about neighborhood norms. The goal was simple yet profound: to create an environment where joy thrived without fear of undue scrutiny. As part of this initiative, we organized monthly meetings where residents could openly discuss their concerns and ideas regarding community living. During one such meeting, I stood before my neighbors, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement as I prepared to address what had transpired over the past months. "We all know what happened at the pool last summer," I began, glancing around the room at familiar faces who had shared this journey with me. "But rather than letting that moment define us negatively, let's use it as motivation to build something better, a community where we can thrive together." Applause erupted from the assembled crowd, signaling that my words resonated deeply with those present. As more residents spoke up, sharing their hopes for Maplewood Estates, it became clear that we were ready to move forward, determined to create a brighter future for our families. In addition to forming the Community Advisory Committee, we also decided to implement family-oriented events designed explicitly around open dialogue about parenting styles and communal behavior. We invited guest speakers, child psychologists who spoke about fostering emotional intelligence in children and how parents could support one another while navigating challenges unique to our neighborhood dynamics. These initiatives proved transformative not only for adults but also for our children. They began participating in organized games at community events, learning cooperation through team-building activities while forging friendships with kids they might never have interacted with otherwise. They laughed together, played together, and began understanding that differences in perspective didn't diminish their ability to connect on a fundamental human level. Even Karen found herself drawn into this new paradigm. Initially hesitant, she eventually attended some gatherings out of curiosity, perhaps sensing that her previous actions had alienated her from many neighbors she once considered friends. As she joined conversations surrounding parenting techniques or community activities focused on inclusivity, there was an opportunity for her perspective to shift slightly. It wasn't without its challenges. Old habits die hard. Occasionally, Karen would voice concerns during meetings about noise levels or acceptable behavior at events, a reminder that her previous mindset lingered beneath the surface. However, instead of responding defensively or retaliating against her views, residents approached these moments with kindness and understanding. One evening during a gathering at my house, Karen expressed frustration over children running around during dinner time, an innocuous complaint seemingly reminiscent of her earlier actions. Instead of letting it escalate into tension, I invited her into a conversation about how we could best accommodate everyone's needs moving forward. What if we designated specific times for free play versus quieter activities? That way everyone knows what to expect. To my surprise, she nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps it dawned on her that compromise was essential for building trust among neighbors in this evolving community landscape. As spring gave way to summer again, the anniversary of that fateful day at the pool approached. But now it was marked not by dread or anxiety, but by a sense of celebration and resilience. We planned an annual neighborhood pool party, not just as a chance for families to come together, but also as an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment toward creating joyful memories without fear of judgment. On the day of the event, laughter filled the air once more as children splashed happily in the water, while parents mingled nearby under umbrellas adorned with vibrant colors reminiscent of joyful summers past. The atmosphere felt lighter, liberated from previous burdens, as families celebrated not just their connections, but also their collective growth through adversity. As I watched my kids dive into the pool with glee, truly relishing every moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. We had emerged from chaos stronger than before. We had taken ownership not only of our story but also woven new threads into it. Threads built upon understanding rather than division. The incident with Karen served as more than just a momentary conflict. It became a catalyst prompting us all toward deeper reflection about life within communities. How we navigate differing opinions while maintaining respect for each other's spaces. How we adapt our parenting styles based on collective values rather than rigid standards imposed by any single individual alone. Ultimately, resolution lay not merely in overcoming disagreements but also embracing growth amid challenges. A testament to what happens when neighbors come together, seeking understanding rather than discord. As summer faded into fall once more, the warmth lingering still, we knew Maplewood Estates had transformed into something richer than ever before. A place where laughter continued echoing freely amidst friendships fostered through shared experiences, and where even those who once stood divided could find common ground through mutual respect nurtured along this incredible journey toward unity.